Welcome to the shadow steam. You've stepped into the quiet part of the night, the part that feels like the walls are listening. Tonight's theme is new beginnings, the kind that turn strange once you realize you're not alone in your new home. These are 3 true stories from people who moved into their dream house and slowly learned why the last owners left so quickly. You'll hear about locked doors that open on their own, rooms that hum when no one's inside, and neighbors who remember faces that shouldn't exist anymore. But these stories, they're not just tales to pass the time, they're warnings, because every light that flickers, every sound in the walls, starts somewhere real. And once you hear them, you'll start to notice the quiet differently. Most people who find this channel late at night forget to subscribe. Maybe they don't want what happens next to follow them. What about you? What time is it where you are right now? And where are you watching from? Tell me. Down in the comments. Let's begin. The first night I heard the hum, I thought it was the fridge. It was that low, steady vibration, like when a truck idles outside your window, or when you press your ear to a running washing machine. It wasn't loud, but it was constant. It started around midnight, humming through the floorboards like the house itself was breathing. At first, I didn't think much of it. The place was old, 1970s build, maybe earlier, and I'd only been here a week. The realtor said it had great bones. I didn't know that meant the bones might actually be singing. I lay there, staring at the ceiling fan wobbling above me, feeling that faint vibration creep up through the mattress frame. It was too low-pitched to pinpoint. Every time I tried to figure out where it was coming from, the sound seemed to shift. Under the floor, then in the walls, then maybe the pipes. Like the house was teasing me. Around 2 a.m., I finally got up. The air was cold, sharper than it should have been for early fall. I padded barefoot across the wood floor, each step making a soft creak. The humming was louder by the door, like something was running underneath the hallway. The lights flickered when I flipped the switch. Just once, but enough to make me stop breathing for a second. I followed the sound to the basement door. It was slightly ajar, a thin line of darkness between the frame and the edge of the wood. The hum seemed to be leaking out from there like it wanted me to open it. I stood there for a full minute, holding my breath. The noise wasn't mechanical. It was too organic. A pulse behind the hum, a rhythm, almost like it was syncing with my heartbeat. I told myself it was the furnace. Old houses make weird noises. That's what everyone says, right? But when I pushed the basement door open, the hum dropped in pitch, deeper, heavier, as if it noticed me. The basement light was a single bulb on a pull chain. When I tugged it, the light buzzed to life, barely bright enough to cut through the gloom. Dust floated in the air, slow and lazy like ash. There wasn't much down there. Concrete floor, some old shelves, the furnace unit against the back wall. But I could feel the vibration through the soles of my feet now. Faint, but steady. It wasn't coming from the furnace. It was coming from beneath the concrete. I knelt down, pressing my palm to the floor. It was warm. And for just a second, I swear I felt a faint tremor. Not an earthquake. More like something shifting slowly below me, like the earth was exhaling. That's when my phone buzzed upstairs. I jumped, hit my head on the underside of the stair, and cursed under my breath. The hum didn't stop, but it seemed to fade slightly, as if backing away, receding into silence. By the time I climbed back upstairs, my pulse was racing. I checked my phone. A notification from the neighborhood app. Anyone else hear that weird noise at night? Someone a few blocks over had posted it an hour earlier. A few comments underneath said the same thing. Yeah, sounds like it's underground. Keeps me up every night. My walls vibrate around midnight. Freaky. I didn't reply. I just turned off my phone and sat on the edge of my bed staring at the floor. The house was silent again. But silence didn't feel safe anymore. It felt fake, like the quiet between 2 breaths. The next morning, I tried to rationalize everything. Old pipes, foundation issues, vibrations from construction nearby, whatever. But when I stepped outside for coffee, I noticed something odd. My neighbor, the older man across the street, was standing in his yard staring at my house. He didn't wave or smile, just watched me. When I raised a hand awkwardly, he turned and went back inside. Later that afternoon, I walked over. His name was Walter. I'd seen it on his mailbox. I figured I'd ask if he'd heard the hum too. When he opened the door, he looked tired. Deep shadows under his eyes, skin grayish like he hadn't slept in days. "Sorry to bother you," I said. I just moved in across the street, the White House. I was wondering if he cut me off. "You hear it already?" His voice was low, strained. "The humming," he said. "You hear it at night?" I nodded slowly. He looked past me, over my shoulder at my house again. His jaw clenched. "You should have never bought that place," I frowned. "What do you mean?" But he just shook his head. "It's under there," he muttered. "Always has been. Thought it stopped after the last owner left." "What stopped?" He shut the door just like that. No explanation. I stood there on his porch, heart pounding, staring at the wood grain in front of me. When I got home, I checked Google for any records of the house. Nothing. No incidents. No deaths. Nothing beyond standard property history. Still, Walter's words clung to me. "It's under there." That night, I didn't want to go to bed. I left the TV on for background noise, trying to ignore the feeling that the floor itself was waiting for something. Around midnight, the hum came again. Stronger this time, the water in my glass rippled. The lampshade trembled. Even the cat, a stray that had started sleeping on my porch, hissed and ran off. The vibration pulsed through the entire house, steady and deep. My heartbeat synced with it without meaning to. The walls felt alive, vibrating like a chest cavity. I grabbed my phone and started recording. I wanted proof, something I could play back in the morning. But when I hit record, the hum changed pitch again. Lower, closer, like it was responding. I stared at the recording icon, listening. My ears rang. The vibration wasn't just under the floor now, it was around me, inside me. A pressure in my skull, a sound I could feel more than hear. I backed toward the basement door. It was open. I know I'd closed it. I always close it before bed. But now it stood wide, the darkness beyond thick and heavy, swallowing the faint hallway light. The humming grew louder the closer I stepped. The air felt charged, vibrating against my skin like static electricity. My breath came out in short bursts, visible in the cold air. I reached for the light switch. Something moved downstairs. Not a shape, just a ripple of motion like air shifting. And then, for the briefest moment, the hum spoke. Not in words, but in rhythm. A pattern. 3 pulses paused, 2 more thump. Thump, 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 thump. Almost like knocking from under the floor. I froze. My hand hovered over the switch. The pattern repeated, slightly faster. Then again. The sound began climbing, layer over layer, until it wasn't just humming, it was resonating. My teeth hurt. The walls quivered. A glass shattered in the kitchen. I couldn't breathe. Then, suddenly, silence. Total. Perfect. Silence. No hum. No vibration. No sound at all. I didn't move for a long time. When I finally reached for the door and slammed it shut, the knob was warm, like someone else had just been holding it from the other side. That night I slept in my car, parked half a block away. Even with the windows up, I thought I could still feel it. A faint vibration under the asphalt, subtle but constant, and when I finally closed my eyes, I dreamed I was standing barefoot in the basement, my ear pressed against the floor, listening to something far below whispering in rhythm with my own pulse. When I woke up, my ears were ringing and the car was vibrating. When I woke up in the car, the first thing I noticed was the condensation on the windows. Thick, smeared, like someone had dragged their fingers through it from the outside. There were 3 lines, then 2 below them, 3. Pause, 2, that same pattern. I sat there, heart pounding, watching my own breath cloud the glass. The neighborhood looked ordinary. Morning light spilling over roofs, kids biking to school, a delivery truck rumbling past. But inside the car, I felt detached from all of it, like I was underwater and everyone else was breathing air. The vibration had stopped, but I couldn't shake the feeling that the hum hadn't ended. It had just gone deeper. When I finally forced myself to go back into the house, everything looked normal. Sunlight poured through the kitchen window, and for a second it felt almost stupid to be scared. I made coffee, trying to pretend I hadn't slept in my car because my house sounded alive. That illusion lasted maybe 5 minutes. When I set my mug down, it rattled slightly. Not from sound and from movement. A faint tremor under the floor. Not strong enough to spill anything. just enough to feel like the ground itself was breathing slow and steady. I dropped to my knees and pressed my palm against the tile. Warm. Exactly like last night. I pulled back my hand, shaking. "It's the furnace," I whispered out loud, even though the sound wasn't coming from there. "It's just heat." But deep down, I didn't believe that anymore. Around noon, I called a contractor, just some guy from Yelp with good reviews. Told him I wanted someone to check for foundation issues. He showed up a few hours later. Mid-30s beard, smelled faintly like cigarette smoke and sawdust. "Name's Mike," he said. "You said you're hearing noises?" "Yeah," I said. "Vibrations mostly, like something running underground," he chuckled. "Could be pipes, could be soil settling. Happens all the time." I wanted to believe that so badly. He went down to the basement with a flashlight while I waited upstairs. Every sound made my skin crawl. The creak of the floor, the echo of his boots below. After a few minutes, I heard him call up, "Hey, you got a crawl space entrance down here?" I blinked. "No, there isn't one." "Well, you do now," he said. "Looks sealed, though." I went downstairs. He was standing near the far corner, crouched beside what looked like a rough concrete patch about 2 feet across. The color didn't match the rest of the floor. Newer, maybe only a few years old. "See this?" he said, tapping it with a screwdriver. "They covered something up here." Not sure why, he scraped a bit of dust away. The edges looked uneven, like someone had poured cement in a hurry. Then, faintly, the hum started again. Not loud. Just enough that we both heard it. Mike frowned. "You got a generator somewhere?" I shook my head. "No, that's what I've been telling you." The sound came from directly under the patch. A deep, low vibration that made the flashlight tremble slightly in his hand. His expression changed, skepticism turning to unease. "Yeah, that's not normal," he said quietly. "You got any old wiring running through here? Maybe an underground line?" "No, nothing." He stood, brushing off his jeans. "Look, I can come back with a sensor. Ground radar, maybe, but I'd charge extra if we're breaking through concrete." "Break it," I said before I even thought about it. "I'll pay whatever." He hesitated. "You sure?" "Yeah." He sighed and went to grab tools from his truck. I stayed in the basement, staring at that concrete patch, feeling the hum pulse just beneath it like a heartbeat. When he came back down with a chisel and hammer, he gave me a weird look. "You're pale, man. You okay?" "Just do it," I said. The sound of metal hitting concrete echoed sharply, cutting through the hum. Dust filled the air. He worked for maybe 10 minutes, breaking the top layer apart. Then he stopped. "Dude," he said. "You might want to see this." I stepped closer. Beneath the broken concrete was something that didn't make sense. A thin layer of metal. Rusted, uneven, like a sheet covering something beneath it. He tapped it. It made a hollow sound. "What the hell is that?" I whispered. "Could be an old septic access," he said. "Or maybe a storage tank. But it's sealed tight." He hit it again. Thud. The hum answered, slightly louder now, the pitch rising for a heartbeat before dropping again. Mike froze. "You hear that?" "Yeah." He swallowed, eyes darting around. "You didn't tell me it was doing that." "I told you something was underneath." He took a shaky breath, then stepped back. "Yeah, I'm done for today. You should probably get a city inspector before you go digging." "Wait." But he was already halfway up the stairs. He didn't even look back. By the time his truck pulled out of the driveway, the hum was louder than ever. Not deafening, just insistent. Like it was trying to fill the space he'd left behind. I stood there alone, staring at that cracked patch of concrete. And then I realized something that made my stomach drop. The metal underneath wasn't smooth. From where the light hit it, I could see faint ridges, curved lines, almost like grooves. And they weren't random. They looked intentional, like writing or symbols. That night, I couldn't stay downstairs. Every time I got close to the basement door, the air felt charged like a storm building underground. The hum was steady now, a low tone that seemed to pulse through my bones no matter where I stood in the house. I tried music, white noise, even leaving the TV on full volume. None of it drowned it out completely. At 3 a.m., I gave up on sleep. I sat on the floor of the living room, wrapped in a blanket, watching shadows move across the walls. Every vibration made my teeth ache. Then, through the hum, I heard something new, faint, but there, knocking. Soft, deliberate, from beneath the floorboards. 3 knocks. Pause. 2 knocks. I whispered, "Stop." It didn't. 3, 2. My eyes filled with tears. Not from fear, but from something deeper, a kind of recognition. The rhythm wasn't random. It was the same pattern I'd felt that first night. The same one from the condensation on the car window. And then it hit me, it wasn't random at all. It was mimicking my heartbeat. I pressed a hand to my chest, and with each thud of my pulse, the floor below me answered. Perfectly in sync, I wanted to scream, but no sound came out. My body just locked up, frozen, while the house pulsed around me. The hum building until it felt like I was inside a living thing. And then, just as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. The silence slammed down hard. I sat there gasping, shaking, sweat cooling on my skin. Then my phone buzzed, a text. "Unknown number. You shouldn't have opened it." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. My chest felt tight. My fingers went numb. When I looked back at the basement door, I realized it was open again. I should have left that night. I should have packed a bag, locked the door, and never looked back. But when I saw the basement door open again, and even though I knew I had closed it, I couldn't make myself run. Instead, I stood there at the top of the stairs, frozen. The house was quiet. Too quiet. My phone was still in my hand, the text glowing faintly on the screen. "You shouldn't have opened it." I tried calling the number back. Straight to voicemail. No name, no ID. Just static for a few seconds before the call ended itself. That sound, the static, had the same pitch as the hum. I told myself it had to be a prank. Maybe the contractor, maybe someone nearby who'd seen him leave. But deep down, I knew that didn't make sense. The text came from nowhere. No area code, no trace. I set the phone on the counter and walked toward the basement door. Every step made the floor creak like the house was complaining. The air got colder the closer I got. When I reached the top step, I could see faint light below, the single bulb still burning, casting long shadows across the concrete. Dust drifted in slow motion through the air, and underneath it all a low sound. Not the steady hum I'd grown used to, something slower, thicker, almost like breathing. I took one step down and the wood groaned under my weight. The sound stopped. The silence was immediate, absolute. My ears rang from it. Another step, still nothing. I made it halfway down when the light flickered, once, twice, then steadied again. I could see the cracked patch of concrete. The spot Mike had broken open. And I swear I saw the metal beneath shift. Just slightly, like the surface rippled. I blinked hard. Maybe it was my eyes adjusting. Maybe it was heat distortion. But when I looked again, I noticed something new. The grooves I'd thought were writing. They weren't grooves anymore. They were raised. Like veins under skin, I crouched closer. My breath fogged the air. The metal looked wet. Without thinking, I reached out. The second my fingers brushed it, the hum came back. A jolt ran through my arm. Not pain, but a vibration so strong it made my bones ache. The bulb above me swayed, swinging side to side. I stumbled back, clutching my hand. The metal kept vibrating, and now there was a faint sound with it, like whispers just below hearing. I should have run. I know that, but instead I said something I'll regret forever. I said, "Hello?" The hum stopped. Then, impossibly, something knocked back. 3 knocks. Pause. 2. The same pattern. I whispered, "What do you want?" Silence, then slowly 5 knocks in a row. Thump, 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 thump. Not the same rhythm. Not my heartbeat. Something else, and right after that, faint but clear, I heard it. A voice from under the floor. A whisper distorted by metal and concrete. Impossible to make out except for one word. "Listen." I bolted upstairs, slammed the basement door shut and leaned against it, shaking. My hand still buzzed like it was full of static. I didn't go back down. Not that night. I stayed awake in the living room, every light on, every sound magnified. The hum returned just before dawn, faint but constant, like it was reminding me it was still there. When the sun rose, I noticed something strange. The wood floor near the basement door had cracked, thin lines spreading out in a rough circle. When I touched them, I realized they weren't cracks. They were bulging upward like something was pushing from underneath. Around noon, Walter and the neighbor knocked on my door. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands shaking. "You've been down there, haven't you?" he said, no greeting. No small talk. I stared at him. What are you talking about? He stepped inside without asking. You broke the seal. I can feel it. Everyone on this street can. My stomach dropped. The seal? He nodded, pacing. It started years ago. Before I moved here. The humming, the dreams, the walls shaking at night. The last owner, he stopped himself, swallowing hard. They covered it up. Thought it would stop. What is it? I asked. He looked at me, and for the first time I saw real fear in his eyes. Not what, who. I thought he was crazy. I wanted him to leave, but then he said something that froze me solid. They found bones once, he said. Under the house next to yours, tiny ones. Like from a hand, I felt my stomach twist. You're lying. He shook his head. You should leave before it takes you too. And then, just like that, he turned and walked out, leaving the door wide open behind him. That night, I sat on the basement stairs again. I told myself it was curiosity, that I needed to understand. But the truth? The hum had changed. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was inside me. I could feel it even when everything else was quiet. A low vibration in my ribs pulsing under my heartbeat. When I finally stood at the bottom of the stairs, the air was thicker, heavier. The light flickered like a heartbeat. The metal plate shimmered faintly, the ridges glowing a dull orange like embers through ash. And that's when I noticed something that made me step back. The cement around the metal had cracked even more, spreading outward like spiderwebs. In the gaps, I could see darkness. I grabbed the flashlight and leaned closer. The beam caught something beneath, not dirt, not rock. Something smooth, then it moved. A slow, rolling shift like muscle under skin. I stumbled back, heart hammering. The flashlight clattered to the floor and spun, its beam flashing across the walls. And in that brief light, I saw something else. Handprints, pressed into the concrete walls. Dozens of them. Faint, stretched, distorted. Some small, some large. All pressed outward, as if they'd been trying to push out from inside the walls. I grabbed the flashlight and ran upstairs, slamming the door behind me so hard the frame cracked. The hum followed. Louder now, angry, I could feel it in my teeth. My bones, my skull. I fell to my knees, covering my ears, whispering, "Stop, stop, please stop." And for one impossible second, it did. The silence hit like a punch. Then I heard it again, that same whisper, right behind my ear this time. Listen, I spun around, but no one was there. The lights flickered once, then died. The house was pitch black, and somewhere beneath me something laughed. I don't remember when I last slept properly. The days blur together now. Light, darkness, then light again, all mixing into one long hum in my head. It's strange how silence can sound so loud once you start listening for it. The night after the laughter, or what I thought was laughter, I unplugged everything in the house. The refrigerator, the heater, even the ceiling fan. I wanted real silence, proof that the vibration was gone. But when I stood in the living room and held my breath, I could still feel it. Not loud anymore, just faint. A low, slow pulse that seemed to come from everywhere at once. I started writing down times. When it started, when it stopped. The pattern didn't make sense. Sometimes it began at midnight, sometimes just after dawn. The intervals changed, but the sound itself never did. Same tone, same rhythm. When I couldn't stand it, I tried to record it again. I set my phone on the table, hit record, and walked away. In the morning, when I played it back, I heard my own voice whisper something I didn't remember saying. "It's closer." The words came between the hums, soft and calm, as if I were explaining it to someone sitting beside me. But I live alone. That morning, Walter's mailbox flag was up. I don't know why I looked. Maybe I was hoping for a sign that someone else still existed in this neighborhood. When I opened it, I found a folded scrap of paper with my name written in shaky pen. It said, "It follows rhythm, no signature, no explanation." I stood there on the curb, rereading it until my hands started to shake. Rhythm, like the knocks, like the pulse, like me. I went back inside and sat on the kitchen floor, the note on the counter beside me. The tile was cold, but under it, under everything, there was still that faint vibration. It felt weaker but steady, patient. That's when I realized I'd been tapping my fingers without thinking. 3 quick taps, a pause, then 2. I froze mid-motion. I don't know if the pattern had come from the house or from me anymore. The next day I went to City Records downtown. I told the clerk I needed old maps of my property. He looked at me funny, but after a bit of searching, he pulled a dusty folder from the back shelves. The original survey drawings were yellowed and delicate, dated over 60 years ago. The plot where my house sits used to be part of a larger tract marked unstable, ground, minor subsidence risk. A handwritten note at the bottom mentioned subsurface resonance tests, but offered no results. When I asked what that meant, the clerk shrugged. Probably early sound or vibration readings for construction. This area is full of underground water channels. Water, vibrations, sound, it all lined up too neatly. Still, it didn't explain why the humming mimicked me, why it seemed to react. That night I tried something new. I placed a few glasses of water around the house. One on the kitchen counter, one on the floor by the hallway, one at the top of the basement stairs. I left my phone recording video on the table facing them. When I checked the footage the next morning, all the glasses were still where I left them. Nothing spilled, nothing moved. But for exactly 2 seconds at 3:07 a.m., the video flickered, like the lights dimmed across every frame at once. In that moment, a faint ripple crossed each glass surface. Just one pulse in perfect unison. I played that clip over and over until the sound in the background started to bother me. It wasn't the hum itself, and it was what came after. A softer tone layered under it like someone humming back. 2 notes, low then lower. An answer. I stopped going into the basement. The door stayed closed now, locked even. Though sometimes I'd find the key on the floor as if someone had tried it from the other side. I told myself I must have dropped it. Still, the cracks on the floor upstairs kept widening. Hair-thin lines first, then small curves that met at the corners. They weren't deep, but they formed the same circular pattern I'd seen in the basement concrete. A faint ring, expanding outward week by week. The hum returned every night now. Almost gentle, almost familiar. I tried sleeping with headphones, but the rhythm always slipped through. At some point, I started to breathe in time with it without realizing. Slow inhale, longer exhale, it felt right, and that scared me most of all. 2 nights ago, everything stopped. No vibration, no tremor, just silence. At first, it felt like relief. I could finally hear my own thoughts again. But as the hours passed, the quiet turned heavy. The air felt thick, waiting. I walked from room to room, whispering, "It's over." But it didn't feel over. When I opened the window to let in some fresh air, a breeze swept through. Soft, cold. I listened for the city sounds, the cars, the insects, anything. But even outside, the world seemed muted. Then I noticed something strange. In the distance, through the quiet, I could feel a vibration. Not hear and feel, faint and far away like thunder through the ground. I leaned out farther, closing my eyes. It wasn't just one direction. It was everywhere. All the houses along the street, one by one, just began to glow faintly in their windows as porch lights flickered on. And beneath the stillness, I realized the hum hadn't disappeared. It had only spread. It was in the pavement, the soil, the walls of every home nearby. A single connected pulse, low and steady, rolling beneath the neighborhood like a heartbeat shared by everything built on this ground. I whispered, "What do you want?" No answer came. But in that moment, I could swear the air around me vibrated back just once. A slow, patient rhythm, 3 beats, pause 2. After that night, everything started to blend together. Days didn't feel like days anymore, just stretches of time measured by when the hum was loud and when it was quiet. Sometimes I couldn't tell if it was real or if it had worked its way inside me for good. When I turned on the faucet, the water vibrated before the flow started. When I touched the walls, I could feel the faint pulse beneath the paint. It wasn't constant anymore. It had a rhythm, like breathing, like listening. I stopped leaving the house. Every time I stepped outside, I could still feel the hum through the ground, faint but present, following me down the street like a second shadow. But when I came back home, it was stronger again. As if the walls were relieved I'd returned. I told myself to stop imagining things, but the more I tried to ignore it, the more the world around me adjusted to its frequency. The radio in my kitchen picked up interference that matched it. My phone battery drained faster whenever it was near the basement door. And the note from Walter, It follows rhythm. Kept replaying in my head like a warning I was too late to understand. Then one morning, I noticed something new. My reflection was out of sync. I'd gone to wash my face, and when I looked up, I swear my reflection blinked a half-second later than I did. Just a fraction of a beat, but I saw it. I froze, staring at myself. I lifted my hand slowly. The reflection followed, but it wasn't quite right. Like it was moving to its own invisible rhythm instead of mine. I backed away from the mirror, heart pounding. The hum was faint that morning, barely noticeable, but it was there, a low vibration at the edge of my hearing. That's when I realized I was breathing in time with it again. I tried distracting myself with noise. TV, podcasts, anything human. But no matter what I played, the hum found a way into the sound. Not loud, but hidden, buried under the voices. A single repeating tone that stretched between silences. I muted everything and sat there waiting. And that's when I heard a sound I couldn't explain. Someone knocking. From outside, 3 knocks. Pause. 2. The same pattern. I ran to the window and looked out. The street was empty. The air was still, then I heard it again. This time, not from outside. From the floor, I pressed my palm down. Warm, steady, alive. And then, for the first time, the hum changed. It started rising in pitch, slowly, smoothly, until it almost became a voice. I couldn't make out words, but there was rhythm, tone, intention. It sounded like something trying to speak through the walls. Through me, I whispered. I'm listening. And for a moment, everything stopped. The silence was so deep I could hear the blood in my ears. Then the vibration returned. Softer. Closer. Almost like a whisper against my skin. I didn't hear a voice, not clearly, but I understood what it meant. Not in words, but in feeling. You opened it. That night I heard a car pull up outside. Walter's truck. I hadn't seen him in days. When I opened the door, he was already walking toward me, face pale, hands shaking. You need to leave, he said before I could speak. I tried, I said quietly. It follows me. He shook his head. You don't understand. It doesn't follow you. It copies you. What? He looked past me toward the house. When it hums, it learns. The first ones thought it was just sound. Then they realized the noise was recording them. The rhythm, its memory. Memory of what? He took a step closer, lowering his voice. Of whoever listens too long. I stared at him. What happens if you do? He hesitated, eyes glistening. You stop knowing which one you are. Before I could respond, something inside the house made a low, drawn-out creak, like wood bending under weight. Walter flinched and backed away. It's awake, he whispered. Then he turned and ran back to his truck. The engine started. Headlights swept across my porch and he was gone. I stood in the doorway for a long time, listening to the quiet. Then faintly the hum came again, only this time it was in sync with my heartbeat, perfectly. By now every clock in the house had stopped. The digital ones blinked random times. The pendulum on the old wall clock swung without ticking. Time didn't feel real anymore. I walked from room to room, and for the first time the hum seemed to move with me. It rose slightly when I stepped, then fell when I stopped, like it was matching my pace. It wasn't just under the floor anymore. It was around me. When I whispered, "What are you?" the sound dimmed, almost shy. When I said, "What do you want?" it pulsed once like a heartbeat, and when I asked, "Are you me?" it didn't respond, but I felt it. The hum inside my chest answering in silence. The last thing that happened before I lost track of the days was small, almost easy to miss. Every photo in my phone, every picture I'd ever taken inside the house, and had changed slightly. In the corners of each one there was a faint distortion, like the air was vibrating mid-shot. And in the most recent photo, the one I took of the cracked floor weeks ago, there was a shadow I didn't remember. A shape, standing just behind me. It wasn't facing the camera. It was facing me. That night I sat in the living room and tried not to breathe. The hum was calm now, steady, almost gentle. It didn't sound like something outside anymore. It sounded like a sound coming from me. The last thing I wrote in my notebook before I passed out was one sentence. I think the house is learning to speak. And when I woke up, there was writing on the wall beside me. Small, faint letters carved into the paint. 5 words, barely legible under the morning light. We already are. Morning light came through the windows in pale strips, cutting across the floor like quiet warnings. For the first time in weeks, the hum was gone. The silence felt heavy, like the whole house was holding its breath. I stayed still for a long time, waiting for the vibration to start again. When it didn't, I realized how empty the place sounded without it. I could hear birds outside, cars passing a few blocks away. Normal life, distant but real. For a second, I wondered if it was finally over. Then I saw the writing on the wall again. "We already are." It hadn't faded overnight. If anything, it looked deeper, as if the letters had grown into the paint instead of over it. When I touched them, the surface was smooth, no indentations at all. The words weren't carved, they were part of the wall now. I packed a bag. I didn't know where I'd go, only that I couldn't stay here another day. While I shoved clothes into a duffel, the air in the room shifted, pressure changing like before a storm. Not the hum, not yet, just the faint pop of air settling as if something behind the walls had started to breathe again. I froze. "No," I whispered. "You're done. I'm leaving." The silence answered with a single vibration under my feet, soft but deliberate. A reminder. I went to the basement door for the first time in days. The lock was still in place, but the key I'd left on the counter was gone. My reflection in the doorknob looked strange, warped like the metal was vibrating even though I couldn't hear it. I turned away, but a low creak made me stop. The door shifted inward an inch, just enough to break the latch. Something pushed from the other side. Not hard, just a slow, steady pressure. I stepped back. The vibration climbed my legs like static, building to a low hum that filled the air again. The house was waking up. I didn't go down. I couldn't. Instead, I opened the front door and stepped outside, bag over my shoulder, sunlight blinding. The street looked normal, quiet, safe, but I could feel it even out there. The same vibration, running through the sidewalk, the asphalt, the air. Every house on the block seemed to hum in unison, faint but synchronized. Windows rattled almost imperceptibly, like all the glass was breathing together. I started walking. Every few steps the rhythm followed, a low pulse under the soles of my shoes. No one else was outside. Curtains moved in a few houses, but no faces looked back. When I reached the corner, I felt the vibration stop, completely. It was the first pure silence I'd heard in months. For a moment, I wanted to cry. Then my phone buzzed. A new text. "No number again, where are you going?" I stared at it. The hum began again, distant but unmistakable. I typed back before I could stop myself. "Away." 3 dots appeared like someone typing. Then, "You can't go. We're already there." The ground beneath me trembled, softly at first, then harder. Porch lights along the street flickered once, perfectly in sync. Every window glowed faintly from within. I ran, I don't remember how far. Maybe a mile, maybe more. By the time I stopped, the hum had faded, replaced by the normal sounds of the city. Sirens, dogs, distant traffic. For the first time, I couldn't feel it under my feet. No vibration, no pulse, nothing. I sat on the curb outside a gas station, shaking, trying to breathe. The clerk inside looked at me strangely when I asked if he heard any weird noises. He said no, just the air conditioning. For a few hours, I believed him. That night, I checked into a cheap motel on the highway. It was small, 1 bed, thin walls, the smell of detergent and dust. I left the TV on for company. White noise filled the room. Comfortable, harmless. When I finally lay down, I realized I could still feel a faint rhythm in my chest. Old habit, I told myself. Residual stress. But it wouldn't slow down when I tried to control it. It just kept time. Steady, perfect, familiar. I reached over and turned off the TV. The screen went black. The room should have been silent. Instead, I heard it again. That low vibration, gentle but unmistakable, running through the mattress, the walls, the floor. It wasn't coming from the house. It was coming from me. I sat up, heart hammering, listening. The tone was softer than before, but the same frequency. The same pulse that had filled every wall back home. Only now, when I exhaled, it exhaled with me. When I tapped the nightstand, 3, pause, 2, the hum answered in perfect rhythm. It wasn't echoing anymore. It was responding. And then I realized what Walter meant when he said it copies you. It wasn't trying to scare me. It was recording me. Every heartbeat, every breath, every word I'd spoken in that house. And now it didn't need the house to keep going. I don't know how long I sat there listening. Eventually, I picked up my phone to call anyone, but the screen was already on. A voice memo was recording. The timer read 0.032, 3 minutes, 2 seconds, 3 pause 2. I hadn't pressed record, I pressed stop. The timer froze. When I hit play, the recording began with static, soft, rhythmic static that sounded like breathing. Then my own voice whispered almost tenderly, "It's all right, just listen." I dropped the phone. The hum filled the room again, louder this time, rolling through the walls like a tide. Outside, the neon motel sign flickered, buzzing in perfect unison. And then for the briefest second before the light died, I thought I heard other voices joining the tone, layers and layers of them, all humming together in the same quiet rhythm. Maybe everyone who ever heard it. Maybe everyone who ever listened. When the power cut, the silence returned. I sat in the dark, waiting for the vibration to stop, but it never did. It just settled deeper, a faint pulse that matched every beat of my heart. Now when I close my eyes, I can't tell which sound is me and which one is it. Maybe there's no difference anymore. The last thing I hear each night isn't silence or noise. It's the same calm, endless tone, steady as breath. The house doesn't hum now. I do. The first thing that struck me about the new house was the smell. Fresh paint, cut wood, and that faint metallic scent you only notice when everything is brand new. It felt too clean, too untouched. Like a showroom version of a home that hadn't decided to be lived in yet. I moved in on a gray Tuesday, the kind of day that seemed to drain color from everything. The movers carried boxes inside while I walked from room to room with the blueprint rolled under my arm, making sure every detail matched what I'd been promised. 3 bedrooms, an open kitchen, a study off the hallway, a finished basement. Everything checked out. Except one thing. Standing in the hallway between the study and the guest room, I noticed a small dip in the floor where 2 boards met. It wasn't loose, just slightly uneven, like someone had replaced it last minute. When I knelt to look closer, I felt a faint change in temperature against my palm. Colder somehow. I told myself it was just the new air system settling. That night I stayed up late unpacking boxes in the study. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that hums in your ears after a while. At one point I thought I heard something shift inside the wall, like wood expanding or air pushing through an unfinished vent. When I looked up, one spot of paint near the corner seemed darker than the rest. I got closer, ran my hand along the wall, and felt a small hollow space beneath the drywall, a section about the size of a door. The next morning I pulled out the blueprint again. Every wall, every measurement, every stud was marked. That hallway wall was solid. No closet, no doorway, nothing behind it but insulation and siding. Still, when I tapped it, the sound came back hollow. I tapped the other walls. They were solid. Only that one gave a low, echoing knock as if something waited behind it. I stood there for a full minute, blueprint in one hand, coffee in the other, convincing myself I was imagining it. Then I noticed something else. The temperature changed again. The hallway felt cooler, not drafty but different, like air was slowly seeping from a hidden space. I called the contractor who'd built the place. He sounded rushed but polite. When I mentioned the hollow wall, there was a pause on the line long enough to make me nervous. He finally said, "That can't be right. We framed that section ourselves." I asked if someone could have added a storage space or wiring panel later. He said no and promised to stop by in a few days to check it himself. When we hung up, I looked back down the hallway. The air still felt cool there. Not freezing, just wrong. That night I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the house felt amplified. Pipes, vents, the settling of the foundation. Around 2 a.m., I got up to get some water. The hallway light flickered once as I passed, and from behind that hollow section of wall I heard a faint sound. A single slow knock. I froze, glass halfway to my lips. The sound didn't come again. After a minute, I told myself it was just the ducks. I even laughed at myself a little before going back to bed. But in the morning, something new was waiting. A small line of dust ran along the baseboard directly beneath that wall, as if air had pushed through from behind. It wasn't much, just enough to notice. And right in the center of it was a faint circular mark, like the bottom edge of a door had moved there recently. I decided to measure. The hallway was 12 feet long according to the plan, but when I measured from one end to the other, I got 11 and a half, half a foot unaccounted for. It could have been framing error, I told myself. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more space behind that wall than there should have been. I pressed my ear against the dry wall. Nothing at first. Then, so faint I almost missed it, air movement. Not steady like a vent, short bursts uneven, almost like breathing. I jerked back, heart hammering, and dropped the measuring tape. It clattered against the floor, breaking the silence. When I picked it up again, the cool air was gone. That evening I went online and searched the house's address, looking for any records of previous builds or demolitions on the lot. Nothing, just the listing, a few inspection reports, and the original permit. I checked every photo from the real estate ad. In the listing pictures, the hallway looked the same, except one tiny detail I hadn't noticed before. On the wall where I now felt the hollow space, there had once been a small framed picture. In my version of the house, it wasn't there. The previous owners or the builders had covered that section completely. But why? I told myself to leave it alone. The contractor would check it out soon, and there was probably a boring explanation. Still, I couldn't stay away. Just before bed, I took a flashlight and shone it along the baseboard. The same faint dust trail. The same circular scuff marks. I crouched down and traced the outline with my finger. The floor felt colder again. When I straightened up, I noticed the paint along that section looked a shade lighter than the rest of the wall, as if someone had recently patched it. For the first time, I said it out loud just to hear how it sounded. There's a door here. The sound of my voice in that narrow hallway startled me. It bounced off the walls too slowly, like the air was thicker there. I backed away, turned off the flashlight, and went to my room. The hum of the refrigerator carried faintly down the hall, a normal sound. But beneath it, barely audible, something else followed, a rhythm I couldn't place. 3 short creaks, then a pause. 2 more. I shut the bedroom door. For a long time I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floorboards, trying to decide if I should call someone. The contractor. A friend. Anybody. But how do you explain something that shouldn't exist? Eventually, exhaustion won. I turned out the light and closed my eyes. Just before I drifted off, a single, almost polite tap came from the hallway wall. One that didn't sound like the house settling at all. And somewhere deep inside that hollow space, something, wood or metal, shifted once, like a latch catching into place. I called the contractor again the next morning. This time he didn't answer right away. When he finally picked up, his voice sounded tired, as if he'd been expecting my call. I told him about the hollow wall, the cold air, even the sound I'd heard last night. He said quietly, "That section shouldn't be hollow. I'll come by tomorrow morning. Don't mess with it until then." His tone made me uneasy, not dismissive, but careful, like he knew something he didn't want to say over the phone. I spent the rest of the day trying not to think about it. Still, every time I walked past the hallway, I felt that pull, the cold draft brushing against my ankles, the urge to knock again just to see if it would answer. By nightfall, I had convinced myself not to look. But when I turned off the lights to go to bed, I realized the hallway wasn't dark anymore. A faint line of light traced the base of that wall. Like something glowing behind it, I didn't sleep much. The contractor, whose name was Greg, arrived just after sunrise. He was a big man, built for work, calm, steady, with the kind of voice that made you trust him. But when I showed him the wall, he frowned and pulled the blueprint out of my hands. He looked from the drawing to the wall and back again, lips pressed tight. "Can I see the basement?" he asked. We went down the narrow stairs. Dust floated through the shafts of light from the small window near the ceiling. The concrete walls were clean, new, except for one patch directly below where the hallway would be. It was a different color. Not wet, just slightly darker, as though someone had poured a newer layer over an older one. Greg crouched down and ran his hand along the line. "This wasn't on our final inspection," he muttered. "Could it just be leveling compound?" I asked. He didn't answer. Instead, he stood, brushed off his hands, and said, "Don't use that hallway tonight. I'll come back with my foreman tomorrow. We'll open it up if we have to." Then he left. I tried to follow his advice, but by evening the unease was back. The cold air had returned, and stronger this time, enough to make the hallway light flicker whenever I walked past. The rest of the house felt fine, warm, ordinary. But that section of wall still seemed to breathe. I decided to record it, just to prove something was happening. I set my phone against the opposite wall, hit record, and left it there overnight. When I checked the footage in the morning, I didn't see much at first. Just shadows shifting as cars passed outside. Then around 2:14 a.m. the frame shook slightly. No sound, no movement, just a subtle vibration across the camera lens, and then the light under the wall appeared again, faint, soft, like a pale strip leaking from a hidden gap. It flickered once, twice, then vanished. When I rewound the clip, something caught my eye. For exactly one frame, right before the light disappeared, there was a shadow. Not a shape, not a figure, just an absence, a darker outline against the glow standing where the door would be. Greg didn't show up the next day. When I called, his number went straight to voicemail. By the third call, the line disconnected entirely. I checked online for the construction company. The website was gone. The phone number listed on my original paperwork led to an automated message saying the business had been dissolved. Every record of them stopped 4 months ago. That night, I sat in the living room, staring at the wall again. The air conditioner kicked on, making the ceiling vents rattle, but the sound didn't cover the other noise. A slow, dull thud, steady as a heartbeat. Coming from behind the drywall, I pressed my palm to the wall, cold, vibrating. Alive, I whispered, "Who's there?" The vibration stopped. Then came one single quiet knock in reply. I stepped back and opened my phone to play the recording from the previous night again, just to convince myself I'd imagined it. But when I hit play, the video glitched halfway through. The image fractured into static for a moment. The sound that replaced the static was faint, but it made my stomach drop. A soft voice, maybe only 2 words, "Let me," then silence. The rest of the recording was normal. By morning, I couldn't pretend anymore that it was air pressure or loose wiring. Something was behind that wall. I called a handyman I'd found online and asked if he could check for moisture damage or hidden ductwork. He showed up in the afternoon, cheerful and curious, until he saw the section I pointed out. He knocked it once with his knuckles, then gave me a tight smile. "Yeah, I can open this for you, but it looks sealed intentionally. You sure you want it cut?" "Yes," I said. "Please." He hesitated, then went back to his truck for tools. I stood at the end of the hall while he worked, listening to the scrape of metal against paint. When his saw blade bit into the drywall, the sound that came out wasn't what I expected. It wasn't the thin crumble of gypsum. It was hollow, deep, echoing, like cutting through something that led somewhere else. He paused and glanced at me. "You hearing that?" Before I could answer, the power flickered. The hallway light blinked once, twice, then steadied. When it came back on, the handyman was staring at the opening he'd made, a clean rectangular cut about a foot wide. He stepped back slowly. Behind the drywall there wasn't insulation or studs. There was another wall, a second layer made of smooth white painted wood, and in the center of it, just visible under the beam of his flashlight, was the edge of a door frame. The outline was faint, but there. Perfectly fitted, perfectly hidden. He turned to me. "Looks like someone sealed a room in here." I stepped closer. The air coming through the opening was colder again, dry and stale, like something untouched for a long time. "Can you open it?" I asked quietly. He hesitated. "I'd need heavier tools." "That's solid wood. Whatever's back there. It's not new." I stared into the gap, heart pounding, feeling that same steady chill against my face. Then faintly from somewhere beyond the second wall, a sound drifted out, soft and slow. Not a voice this time. A rhythmic scrape, back and forth like something brushing against the floor. The handyman turned off his saw. We stood there listening, neither of us breathing. After a long moment, he whispered, "You didn't build this, right?" I shook my head. He picked up his tools, eyes wide. "Then whatever's in there. It's been sealed for a reason." He left before I could stop him. The house fell quiet again. Only the faint cold air from the gap remained, curling around my ankles like a draft that knew my name. I covered the hole with plastic for the night, taped it tight, and told myself I'd call someone else in the morning. But before I walked away, I heard it again. 3 slow knocks, a pause, 2 more, the same rhythm. I didn't touch the plastic covering that night, but I could hear it moving. Every so often it crinkled softly, like a slow breath pressing against it from the other side. I left all the lights on and sat in the living room pretending to read, but my eyes kept drifting to the hallway. The air felt wrong again, too still, too expectant. Around midnight, the temperature dropped sharply enough that I could see my breath. The heater was still running, but it didn't make a difference. That's when I knew whatever was behind that wall wasn't staying still anymore. By morning, I'd made up my mind. I couldn't wait for Greg, and the handyman wasn't coming back. I needed to see for myself what was back there. I went to the hardware store and bought a small crowbar and a mask. It felt ridiculous, like I was about to expose a bad renovation job, but the thought of that hidden door kept me moving. When I got home, sunlight was slanting down the hallway, a rare bright spot that morning. The plastic covering was still taped up, but the corners fluttered slightly even though no air vent was nearby. I took a deep breath, peeled the tape off, and pulled the plastic away. The cold hit me immediately, a sharp, stale draft like air from an attic that hadn't been opened in years. Behind it, the cut drywall framed the smooth white wood again. It was seamless, no visible hinges, but the faint outline of a door remained, and near the bottom, just above the baseboard, a single mark scratched into the paint, an arrow pointing down. I hesitated for a long time before prying the edge of the wood. It was thicker than I expected, heavy, and made a deep groan as it shifted. Dust fell in a fine mist, catching the sunlight like smoke. When the gap widened enough, I aimed my flashlight through it. A narrow space appeared, dark, cramped, and empty, but the beam caught something in the distance. A wall, another white wall, but this one angled sharply, like part of a small corridor rather than a room. I pressed my ear to the opening. Silence. Then, so faint it almost blended with my heartbeat, a single creak, wood shifting under pressure. I widened the hole just enough to slip through. Inside, the air was dense, the smell of dust and old wood stronger than anywhere else in the house. It wasn't big, maybe 4 feet wide, running several feet back. My flashlight beam hit the far wall, revealing what looked like another door, this one unfinished, made of raw wood without a handle. I stepped forward carefully, feeling the floor dip slightly. The boards were solid but soft, like they'd absorbed moisture over the years. When I reached the second door, I noticed the same arrow carved into the wood, pointing downward again. I aimed my flashlight at the floor. Right below the arrow was a square outline, faint but visible, a trapdoor. For a long time, I just stared at it. There was no reason for a trapdoor in a brand new house. The blueprint hadn't shown one. The basement was supposed to be sealed concrete, nothing else. But there it was, hidden under layers of wood and time. When I crouched to touch it, the boards were colder than ice. Not normal cold, air-conditioned cold. It felt like the temperature dropped 10 degrees the moment I brushed the edge. I wedged the crowbar under the lip and pulled. It resisted at first, then lifted with a reluctant sigh. The smell that came out wasn't rot or mold. It was cleaner somehow, like untouched air from a sealed space. The beam of my flashlight showed a narrow staircase descending into darkness. Wooden steps, steep, leading somewhere below the level of the basement. My phone buzzed suddenly, startling me. An unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something about the timing made me answer. Hello? A pause. Static. Then a familiar voice. Greg's. Don't go down there. His voice was quiet, shaky. You found the room, didn't you? I swallowed hard. What's down there? Another pause, longer this time. When he spoke again, it was barely a whisper. That part of the foundation wasn't ours. We discovered it when we dug the base. The blueprints were wrong. They told us to seal it and pretend it didn't exist. Who's they? I don't know, he said. But one of my crew went down before it was sealed. He never came back up. The line clicked dead. I stood there for what felt like hours, phone still in my hand, staring at the open hatch. The air drifting out of it was still cold but steady now, like it was waiting. Logic told me to shut it and never look again. But curiosity, that was stronger. I went back to the living room, grabbed a rope from one of the unpacked boxes and tied it to the banister. Then I looped it around my wrist, held the flashlight in the other hand, and started down the steps. The first few creaked under my weight. The air smelled faintly of old earth and concrete. After about 6 steps, I reached the bottom and realized the space wasn't empty. The walls were whitewashed, smooth and clean. No dirt, no decay. In the center of the room stood an old wooden chair and a small table with something folded neatly on top, a stack of blueprints. I moved closer. The papers were crisp, unyellowed. They weren't old at all. At the top of the first page, in bold black print, was the name of my address, my house, and the logo of the construction company Greg worked for. But the date in the corner was from a year in the future. My flashlight flickered. The air pressure shifted again as if someone had opened a door behind me. I turned, but the staircase was gone. The wall behind me was smooth, no opening, no hatch, just a solid stretch of white. My rope hung uselessly from my wrist, frayed at the end where it had been cut. For a second I couldn't move. My throat felt tight, every sound muffled except the faint hum that started in the floor. A vibration. Low and steady. The same rhythm as before, 3 short beats, pause, 2. I shone the flashlight across the room, desperate for any way out. On the far wall, a small metal vent cover sat crookedly, barely big enough for an air duct. When I stepped closer, I saw something scratched into the wall beside it. Not arrows this time. Words. This room wasn't on the blueprint. The letters were shallow, written in something that looked like pencil. Beneath it, smaller, fainter, as if added later, neither were you. My flashlight flickered once more, then went dark. The hum beneath the floor grew stronger, pulsing like a heartbeat under my feet. And somewhere in the dark, just beside where the table stood, I heard the unmistakable sound of something shifting its weight, slow, careful, waiting for me to speak first. For a moment, I couldn't see anything. The flashlight was gone, and the air felt heavy, pressing close around me. I stood perfectly still, listening. The hum that had filled the floor faded to a faint vibration, steady, constant, almost like the sound of electricity in the walls. I told myself there had to be another way out. There had to be. I traced the wall with my hands, moving slowly. The surface was smooth and dry, almost too smooth. Then my fingers brushed across a sharp edge, a sheet of paper pinned to the wall with a small tack. It was another blueprint. I lifted it, squinting in the dim light that leaked from somewhere unseen. The drawing showed my house again. Every room, every hallway drawn exactly as before. But at the bottom corner, a new space had been added, one that hadn't been there on any other version. The room I was standing in neat printed letters beneath it, Future Edition, Owner's Quarters. I didn't understand at first. Then faintly I heard the sound of movement above me, footsteps on the floor, slow and deliberate, as if someone was walking through the house. I called out, thinking maybe Greg had come back. No answer. Only the soft creak of boards overhead, then silence. I looked again at the blueprint. My name was printed at the bottom beside a signature line labeled Occupant Approval. It was blank. Something changed in the air. The temperature rose slightly and the faint hum settled into a kind of calm. The cold, stale quality began to fade, replaced by a faint scent of paint. Fresh paint. When I turned around, the wall that had been solid before now showed a faint outline again, as if the door had returned. I stepped toward it cautiously, pressed my hand against the seam and felt the resistance give. Light poured in. The hallway was there, bright and ordinary. The cut drywall, the tools, the rope, all gone. Only smooth, unbroken wall. It looked as if it had never been touched. I stumbled into the living room, dazed. My phone was still on the table, still open to my last call. I pressed redial, but the number no longer existed. When I checked the video files from earlier, every one of them had changed. The timestamps were all set to that morning. The hallway recordings were gone, replaced with blank, silent clips of the empty living room. Even stranger, when I opened my front door, the air outside smelled different, cleaner, newer, like a house that had just been finished. I stepped onto the porch and looked back. The windows all gleamed in perfect symmetry. The paint on the siding looked fresh too, as though someone had repainted it overnight. For a long time I stood there trying to make sense of it. Maybe I'd dreamed the hidden space, maybe I'd imagined the voice, the call, the cold air. But deep down I knew it had happened. That evening I heard a knock at the door. A delivery driver stood there holding a thick envelope. "Construction company documents," he said. "You're the listed contact." I took it, confused. There was no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, another blueprint, cleaner and more detailed than before. Every room looked the same, except one. A small rectangular section near the center of the house was now marked, "Sealed room, access restricted." Right below that, in small print, "Approved by current owner." My own signature was printed next to it, perfect and familiar. That night, as I got ready for bed, the house felt perfectly quiet again. But before I turned off the last light, I noticed something new on the floor near the hallway wall. Fine white dust, as if fresh plaster had been sanded smooth. And faintly, beneath the floor, a new vibration started, soft. Rhythmic, patient, not loud. Just enough to let me know the house wasn't quite finished with me yet. The first night I found the box, I wasn't even supposed to be in the attic. The realtor had mentioned that the access panel was just for storage utilities, and the seller said everything had been cleared out. But when I heard the soft thump above my bedroom ceiling around midnight, curiosity won over common sense. It didn't sound like pipes or wind. It sounded deliberate, like a small object rolling to a stop. The house was still new to me. I'd moved in only 2 weeks before. Every creak, every hum still felt like an unfamiliar language I was trying to translate. So I grabbed a flashlight and climbed up the pull-down ladder. The air up there was dry and still. My beam of light cut through the dust like fog. At first glance, the attic looked empty except for a few insulation rolls and a coil of wire. Then the light caught something in the far corner. A cardboard box about the size of a shoebox, half buried under insulation. The cardboard was old and soft around the edges, taped with yellowed strips. Someone had written on the top in black marker, "Family." I sat cross-legged on the plywood floor and peeled the tape back. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them, old printed ones, not digital. Thick, glossy, slightly curled at the corners. They were all of people standing in front of houses. Some of the photos had dates scrawled on the back, all from different years. The first one was a smiling couple on a porch, holding a baby. The woman wore a bright red sweater, the man a white t-shirt and jeans. Their faces were clear and cheerful. The second photo showed what looked like the same couple years later, with 2 kids now. They were in the same spot on the porch, same smiles, same red sweater, just older. Each photo after that seemed to repeat the same scene, with small differences. New coats of paint, new plants in the yard, different light, but always the same family, except the last photo. In that one, the porch was empty, no people. Just the house lit by overcast daylight and a single toy, a faded red ball lying near the steps. At first I thought maybe the family had just lived here before me. The siding looked similar and the windows matched. But when I checked closer, something felt off. The house in the pictures wasn't exactly mine. The porch railing had 1 fewer post and the front door had a different pattern of glass. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd seen it somewhere. I set the box aside and climbed down, meaning to check the photos again in the morning. But later that night I woke up to a faint scratching sound, like something brushing the inside of a wall. It came from above, near where the attic ladder folded up. I turned on the light and listened. It stopped instantly. The next day I brought the photos into the kitchen to look at them in daylight. Something strange caught my eye this time. In the earliest pictures, the family looked perfectly posed. But by the later ones, their expressions changed. The smiles were smaller, the eyes less focused. In one, the father's hand rested on the boy's shoulder, but the fingers looked blurred as if he'd moved them mid-shot, or like the photo had warped around them. I told myself it was just film aging. Still, I felt uneasy. When I turned the last photo over, the empty porch, there was something written on the back in faint pencil. Still here. That night I dreamed about the porch. It wasn't mine, but it was close enough to feel familiar. I was standing in the yard, watching the family pose for a photo. The father was holding the baby again, the mother waving to someone just out of frame. Then the mother turned her head slightly. Her eyes met mine directly, like she knew I was watching. I woke up before the flash went off. The next morning I checked online for the address on the back of one of the early photos. It wasn't far, just 2 neighborhoods over. The house still existed. The photo on the real estate listing showed it freshly renovated, with a new porch railing and white trim. The description read, "Recently updated after long-term vacancy. No previous owner records available." I almost called the listing agent to ask about the old owners, but stopped myself. What would I even say? Instead, I printed the listing photo and compared it to the last picture in the box. They were identical now. The porch railing matched. The new paint color? The same windows. The only difference was the red ball. It wasn't in the listing photo. That afternoon, I went up to the attic again, half convinced I'd missed another box. The space was quiet, sunlight spilling in through a small vent near the roof. But something had changed. Where the box had been sitting, a faint rectangle was marked in the dust, cleaner than before, as if it had been moved and put back again. I looked around. No footprints, no sign of animals, nothing disturbed. Still, the insulation near the far wall seemed slightly uneven. I pressed on it gently and felt empty space behind it. When I pulled the insulation aside, a small wooden panel revealed itself, screwed shut. Someone had painted over it the same color as the rafters, but the outline was there, a hidden compartment. I found a screwdriver in the garage and went back up. The wood was dry and splintered, but came loose easily. Behind it was a narrow cavity just a few inches deep. At first I thought it was empty, but the flashlight beam caught a glint. Metal. I reached in and pulled out a small silver frame about the size of a postcard. Inside it was a photo. The same family again. Only this time they weren't on the porch, they were standing in a living room. My living room. Same curtains, same fireplace, even the same rug I'd bought from the previous owner. The father's face looked tired now, and the mother's smile was forced. The children stood stiffly in front, eyes slightly off camera, and behind them, reflected faintly in the glass of a framed picture on the wall, was another person, someone standing at the far edge of the room. Half in shadow, the outline looked familiar. It looked like me. I set the frame down and stepped back, suddenly aware of how quiet the attic had become. No creaks, no hum, just still air. Then a faint sound rose from below, something sliding across the kitchen counter, like paper moving under its own weight. I climbed down quickly. The photos I'd left spread out on the table were no longer scattered. They were stacked neatly, with the top one flipped face down. On its back, written in the same faint pencil, were two new words: "Look closer." Morning light made the kitchen look ordinary again, yet the stack of photos sat exactly where I'd left them. Too neat, as if arranged by a careful hand. I hesitated before touching them. The pencil marks on the last one, "Look closer," hadn't faded overnight. I turned it over. The photo showed the same porch scene, but something subtle had changed. The curtains in the window behind the family were open now. Through the glass, I could see a faint shape, a blur that might have been a person standing inside. I checked the rest of the photos. A few others had changed too. Small things. A light turned on, a toy moved, a door slightly ajar. Nothing dramatic, just different enough that I knew my memory wasn't wrong. I told myself there had to be a logical reason. Maybe I'd mixed the order somehow. Maybe the attic dust had smudged the prints. Still, I found myself glancing toward the ceiling every few minutes, half expecting another sound from up there. By late afternoon, I decided to look for information. I went online and typed the address from the earliest photo again, digging deeper into property records. The listing showed a name: Ellen M. Cray. The earliest deed dated back almost 30 years. A quick search pulled up an old community news article about a local family relocating suddenly. No photos, just a single line that made my stomach tighten. The Cray family left town without public notice. House placed for sale by bank trustees. The date matched the year of the last photograph. I printed the article and set it beside the photos. The name felt familiar for some reason, but I couldn't place it. As I read it over, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Hi," a man's voice said, polite but cautious. "This is Mark from County Records. You made an online request for old property photos?" "Yes," I said. "I just wanted to confirm your address," he continued. When I gave it, he hesitated. Strange coincidence. "The parcel history on your property overlaps with another, registered to an Ellen M. Cray. The record shows a merge about 10 years ago." "So my lot used to be part of theirs?" "Technically, yes," he said. "Looks like the previous survey lines were redrawn. Happens sometimes with older builds." He paused, then added quietly, "Funny thing, though, there's a note here that the earlier house was demolished, but the demolition file's blank, no date, no contractor, nothing." He promised to email whatever scanned documents he could find. When the email arrived that evening, it contained a single attachment, a grainy photo labeled "Structure prior to removal." It was the same house from the pictures in the box. I spent the rest of the night cross-referencing details. Porch size, roof angle, even the color of the siding all matched. Only the foundation line was different. Mine extended several feet farther back. Somewhere in that space, I realized my house and theirs overlapped. That thought stayed with me as I moved through the rooms. The floor felt uneven under my feet, though it had never done that before. The walls seemed to hold sound a moment too long after I spoke. When I passed the mirror in the hallway, my reflection looked slightly off. Nothing supernatural, just a trick of the light. Still, the house felt like it was holding its breath. The next morning, a small envelope was on my porch. No return address. Inside was a single Polaroid, newer than the others, colors sharp and recent. It showed my living room exactly as it was now. Same furniture, same curtains. But in the photo, on the coffee table, sat the box from the attic, open, with photos spilling out. I looked over at my actual coffee table. Empty. The box was upstairs where I'd left it. I checked the back of the Polaroid. In faint pencil, again the same handwriting. "Please put us back." I carried the picture upstairs, heart racing even though I told myself it had to be a prank. The attic hatch creaked as I pulled it open. Sunlight streamed through the vent, and for a moment everything looked harmless. The box was still there, but the lid had been set neatly aside. A small gap had opened in the insulation near the beam, the same spot where I'd found the hidden frame before. I knelt down, sliding the new Polaroid inside the box on top of the others. As soon as I did, the air in the attic shifted, warmer, lighter, like a breeze had moved through even though no window was open. The smell of dust faded, replaced by something faintly floral, almost pleasant. I told myself I was just tired. "Still," I said aloud, "there, they're back." The quiet that followed felt satisfied somehow. That evening I tried to distract myself with work. The house remained calm. No odd noises, no cold drafts. For the first time in days, everything seemed still. I even began to wonder if that was all it had been. Just an old box stirring up imagination. Then, near midnight, my phone buzzed with a new email. It was from the same county records address, though the sender name had changed to E. Cray. The subject line read, "Blueprint update attached," was a single PDF. When I opened it, it wasn't a blueprint at all. It was a scanned photo, the same family again. Only this time there were 5 people instead of 4. The 5th stood slightly apart from the group, blurry, as though caught mid-step, looking directly toward the camera. The outline was faint but unmistakable. Me, wearing the same jacket I had on that day. I blinked, convinced it was a trick of resemblance, but the timestamp in the file's corner read today's date. I closed the laptop slowly and walked to the window. Outside, the streetlights glowed steady, the neighborhood silent. But in the reflection of the glass behind me, the dining room wall looked different. Where the family photos now hung, frames I'd placed only last week, one extra picture had appeared, a candid shot I'd never printed. Me, standing in the attic holding the silver frame. I didn't touch the photos again that night. I turned off the light, closed the laptop, and went to bed with the uneasy sense that the house knew more about me than it should. Somewhere between waking and sleep, I thought I heard a faint sound, a gentle click, like a camera shutter coming from upstairs. Then nothing. I woke up to sunlight cutting through the blinds and a quiet so complete it felt deliberate. No cars outside, no wind, no hum from the refrigerator. For a second I thought the power had gone out, but the clock still glowed 7:42. The first thing I saw was a photograph sitting on my nightstand. It hadn't been there when I went to bed. It was one of mine, a digital print I'd taken of the living room when I first moved in. But this version looked aged, slightly yellowed around the edges, as though it had been sitting in sunlight for years. And just like before, something was different in the image. In the corner of the photo, behind the sofa, the family's box was visible again. Open. I went downstairs immediately. The box was exactly where I'd left it in the attic. I brought it down to the kitchen table, determined to sort every photo by date and see if I'd been imagining the changes. As I laid them out, something strange became obvious. Each picture had a duplicate. 2 of every photo, same composition, same lighting, except for one subtle difference in each pair. A different hand placement, a turned head, a light that shouldn't be on. I made 2 piles, originals and variations. When I finished, there were exactly 20 pairs, 40 photos total. In the middle of the table sat the newest Polaroid, the one that had shown my own living room. It didn't have a pair. That's when I noticed the bottom of the box wasn't flat. There was a thin layer of cardboard separating it from a shallow compartment underneath. I pried it up carefully. Inside lay an old photo album, wrapped in a paper sleeve and tied with a piece of frayed string. On the cover, pressed into the leather, was one word: Cray. I carried it to the sofa and untied it. The pages were thick and glossy, the kind used for formal portraits. Each page held one large photo centered neatly in the middle. The first several pages were familiar. The same family, the same porch, the same children growing older. But halfway through, the order stopped making sense. One photo showed the living room, again almost my living room, except this time it was empty, the furniture gone. Another showed the front yard overgrown with weeds. The next one made my stomach tighten. It was a close-up of a photo lying on a table. My table. And in that photo, the same album I was holding now was open to this exact page. I flipped ahead quickly. The final image was blank, just the faint texture of the paper, like something had once been glued there and carefully removed. I closed the album and sat still for a long time, trying to think rationally. The family must have lived here before, maybe even been related to the builder. The repetition, the changes, it could all be a trick of memory or some strange photography project left behind. But part of me couldn't shake the feeling that the photos were watching me rearrange them, like a mirror catching my reflection at an angle I didn't expect. I decided to lock the box away. That evening, as I was putting it in the hall closet, a piece of mail slid through the slot in my front door. No postage, just an envelope with my name handwritten across it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with printed text. If you're living at 14 Briar Lane, the attic is not original construction. Please contact the survey office immediately. The note was unsigned, but at the bottom corner, faint and smudged, was a printed header. County Archive Division. Structure mapping. I called the number on the bottom. A woman answered, her voice calm and efficient. When I gave her the address, there was a pause on the line. "Who told you to call this number?" "I got a note," I said. Another pause. "There's no open case under that address, but..." She hesitated. "That property's on a flagged list. You said you're inside the residence?" "Yes." She exhaled softly. "Please don't disturb the upper structure. We've had anomalies in duplicate surveying. I'll send an inspector tomorrow." I didn't sleep much that night. The house made its usual small noises, pipes, settling, wood. But underneath it all, I could swear I heard something like paper sliding slowly against paper, as if someone were flipping through photographs in the dark. At 2 a.m., I turned on every light and checked the rooms one by one. Everything was in place. But when I reached the living room, the air felt colder again. The album was sitting on the coffee table even though I'd locked it away. The cover was open to the last page. And this time, there was a photo glued there. New, glossy, still curling at the edges. It showed me standing in the hallway, holding the same envelope that had come through my door only hours earlier. The timestamp printed on the lower corner read, "Tomorrow's date." Morning came, and with it the county inspector, a middle-aged man in a safety vest carrying a clipboard. He looked around politely but seemed distracted, checking the walls, measuring corners. Finally, he climbed into the attic. I waited below, pacing. After several minutes, his voice called down, "You said this area was original?" "That's what the listing said," I replied. He made a thoughtful noise. "There's a secondary frame above the insulation, different wood grain, almost like a room was built over another." Then silence. "Everything okay?" I called up. He climbed down slowly. expression neutral but pale. "There's a set of old floorboards up there, parallel to the ceiling joists," he said. "Nothing unsafe, but unusual. They don't connect to the current support beams. So, what does that mean?" He adjusted his glasses. "It means that attic was once a floor. Your house might have been built directly over another structure. Happens when builders reuse foundations, but this looks intentional." He hesitated, then added, "You might want to check your records again. Make sure you're the only owner on file." After he left, I opened my property deed. Everything was standard until I reached the final page, where my signature sat neatly above a line of printed names. There were 2 names listed as previous owners, Ellen and Thomas Cray, and a third line beneath them, faintly typed, nearly faded out, current co-occupant. The space for the second name was blank. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with the photos spread out again. I tried to convince myself it was all clerical error, old paper records merging where they shouldn't, but when I looked closer at the pairs of photos, something new appeared. In each variation version, one more detail had changed. An extra person in the background, barely visible at first, growing clearer in the later images. By the final photo, they were standing among the family, shoulder to shoulder, wearing my jacket, and in the newest Polaroid that had arrived with the mail, the family was gone entirely. Only the house remained, except now, there was someone standing in the window. I didn't open the curtains that morning. Light made the house look normal, and I didn't trust normal anymore. The photographs were still on the kitchen table where I'd left them the night before, neatly stacked, like they'd been organized after I went to bed. The photo on top wasn't one I remembered printing. It showed the front of my house under cloudy skies, a view from across the street. A small note was written beneath the image in pencil. "Thank you for keeping us." I stared at it, unsure whether to feel comforted or warned. The county inspector called mid-morning. His voice was careful, measured. "Ms. Cray?" he asked. I froze. "That's not my name." "Sorry," he said quickly, "must have mixed files. Anyway, I just wanted to confirm you're the current occupant of 14 Briar Lane." "I am." He hesitated before continuing. "We double-checked the archive. Your house is officially listed under 2 construction records, the original and the reissue. The strange thing is, the newer file doesn't show any builder information. It just says transferred from prior foundation." I asked if that was unusual. "It's rare," he admitted. "Almost like someone copied the structure from an earlier blueprint and built it exactly the same way." After a pause, he added quietly, "You might want to keep a copy of your deed somewhere safe. There's a note in the file about archival photographs being stored with the residents." That phrase, "stored with the residents," made my stomach twist. I thanked him and hung. The rest of the day passed in uneasy silence. Every time I walked by the table, I caught myself glancing at the top photograph. Once or twice, I thought it looked brighter than before, as if the light in the image had changed. By sunset, I couldn't take it anymore. I gathered every photo, every Polaroid, every page from the album, and sealed them in a large envelope. My plan was simple: drop them off at the local library archive. Let someone else handle them. But when I turned the envelope over to seal it, I noticed a faint stamp on the paper, 3 letters pressed into the surface. CRY. I didn't remember buying that brand. Outside, the air was sharp and cool. The neighborhood looked calm, the sky turning amber above the rooftops. I started toward my car, envelope tucked under one arm. Halfway down the walkway, I stopped. The front window of my house reflected the streetlights, but the reflection wasn't quite right. In the glass, the curtains were open, though I'd closed them before leaving. And in that reflection, behind the curtain, someone stood in the living room, half turned toward the window. My first thought was that it was just me, caught in the angle of the glass. But when I moved, the figure didn't. I blinked, looked again, empty room. No movement, no shape. Just the warm glow of the lamp inside. Still, I couldn't shake the cold feeling that the reflection had been waiting for me to notice it. At the library, the archivist, a soft-spoken older woman, took one look at the envelope and frowned. "Old photographs?" she asked. "Yes, found them in my attic. They belong to the family who lived there before me." She flipped the envelope gently, studying the stamp on the back. "Cray," she murmured. "That name sounds familiar. We used to have a volunteer here by that name. Donated a large collection years ago. Photos of local homes mostly. Her eyes flicked toward the envelope again. Would you mind if I check our records? She disappeared behind the counter, leaving me standing in the quiet reading room. Rows of microfilm machines hummed faintly in the background. When she returned, she carried a single binder and opened it to a list of donations. Near the middle of the page was the entry, Cray Family Archive, Residential Documentation, transferred 1998. Location missing box 4, she looked up. That box never turned up after the move to this building. Funny coincidence. Box 4, I said slowly. That's the number written on mine. Her eyebrows rose. Maybe it found its way home. She smiled politely, but something in her expression shifted. Half curiosity, half hesitation. Would you like to leave them here for cataloging? Yes, please, I said, handing the envelope across the counter. When I drove home, the relief was almost physical. The house looked smaller than before, less imposing. For the first time in days, I felt like maybe the worst of it was over. I made tea, sat on the couch, and opened my laptop. My inbox held a single unread email. No sender, no subject line. The body contained one image attachment. IMG 1001.jpg. I clicked. It was a photo of the library counter taken just a few hours earlier. The archivist was there, smiling politely. But behind her, sitting on the counter, was the envelope I'd left, and beside it, half visible in the reflection of the glass display case, was someone who looked like me, holding a camera. I closed the laptop and turned off the light. For a long time, I sat in the dark, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the faint creak of settling wood. Somewhere deep in the house, something made a soft snapping sound like the click of a shutter. I walked to the living room and switched on the lamp. The room was exactly as I'd left it, except for one thing, a single photo lying face down on the coffee table. When I turned it over, it was a Polaroid, fresh, still developing. The image was of my front porch taken from outside, with the window curtains open and a faint figure standing inside near the lamp. My phone buzzed. A new message appeared on the screen with no number attached. The family is complete. I don't remember sleeping after that. By morning, sunlight filled the room again. Everything looked ordinary. Walls clean, curtains closed, air still. I checked my phone. No new messages. For a brief second, I wondered if I'd imagined it all. But when I walked outside to get the mail, I saw something that made me stop cold. Across the street, taped to the lamppost, was a missing person flyer. It showed a smiling woman standing in front of my house, holding a camera. The name below the photo read Ellen M. Cray. The date on the flyer, printed this morning. I went back inside slowly. The house was silent, the light soft and ordinary again. But on the hallway wall, the framed photos I'd hung weeks ago looked different. No longer blank, no longer aged. Now, each one held a perfect, color photo of the same family, parents, 2 children, and a 5th person standing quietly behind them. I touched the glass. The surface was cool, steady, real. In the distance, I thought I heard the faint click of a camera again, followed by a quiet whisper that might have been nothing more than the settling of air. Still, the words formed clearly in my head as if someone were standing right beside me. Hold still.